This is the regular school committee meeting of the Winchester School Committee for February 6, 2018. We have a full agenda. We'll have our student report. We have reports and discussion items of the superintendent's evaluation mid-year formative assessment and an update on the FY19 budget. Our action items are to vote on the McCall expansion phase 2, vote on the program of studies for the high school for next year, and on school start time, the school start time study committee recommendation. Our future meetings will be March 13th and March 20th, and we're looking forward to some reports on music, visual arts, and looking at the updated McCall program of studies for next year as well. So I'm thinking people might be here for public comment on a certain topic, and so I'm thinking we might have the student report first, and then maybe talk about, maybe have open it up to public comment then. So if Megan and Nate can come forward and give their report, that'd be great. Or you guys have to share a mic. I guess that's all the mics we get.
So Student Council will be having their Night of the Arts on March 6th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the high school. And that's our biggest event of the year, so we're really excited. Students and faculty have the opportunity to showcase their drawing, sculpture, film, music, honestly anything that kind of falls in the arts category. And we're really excited because we already have one teacher, Miss Angus, who's beloved by everyone at the high school, who's already said that she's going to perform. The Science Olympiad team placed 7th out of 34 teams in Massachusetts, I believe last week. And then the math team also placed 4th in the region at the regional meet last week as well. The Acapella Invitational was last Friday, and I went to that, and it was absolutely fantastic. The chamber singers sang as well as the octets, and then there were also college groups from Babson, UMass, Lowell, and Northeastern University, and they're actually students who used to be in the music program at the high school who were singing those groups, which was really wonderful to see. And then I also had my Northeast Regional Student Advisory Council meeting last Friday, and our 3 topics that we're focusing on are college and career readiness, mental health, and then inclusivity. And we are going to create a website that informs students about these topics and gives advice, and that's kind of our project for the main year. So, yeah.
Thank you.
The Spanish exchange trip leaves this Thursday. I know everyone is very excited about that. Big trip. The winter music performance will be happening this Wednesday, so tomorrow at 7 at the high school auditorium. A lot of practice has gone into it so far. I know a lot of different facets of the music program are going to be coming together to play in that. Connect and Commit will be holding a Celebrate Our Differences meeting this Thursday night with several activities centered around the theme of celebrating our differences. And tomorrow for WinBlock, we're going to have several assemblies about electives and course selection for this next year, course selection coming up. And next week's WinBlock, there will be an electives fair, and a lot of students are looking forward to that. All of boys hockey, girls hockey, and boys basketball beat Lexington recently. Boys basketball is 11-5, and the boys and girls track teams had some pretty successful individual performances at the league meet this past Monday night. Chris DeCaro placed 2nd in shot put, and Victor Vikchev placed 4th, but he set a school record in the 55-meter dash. On the girls track team, Anna Madden placed 1st in the 300-meter, and she also placed 1st in the long jump. And everything's
That's cool.
good.
Thank you. Anybody have any quick questions?
A comment and a question. Either one of you going on the Spanish trip? And I just want to share with the school committee that concert at the high school, the a cappella invitational really was successful, but the gate charge for that actually was going to offset the cost of the trip that the school committee approved to Nashville. So not only was it a great concert, but our alumni who came back with their college groups basically donated their time for that. So it was just tremendous. It's a perfect example of kind of some exciting fundraising, a little outside the box of car washes, which we're not going to do in February anyway. So I thought that was great. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so as I look over the agenda, I'm thinking if it's okay with the rest of the committee, I'm going to skip. We're going to defer the reports and discussion items and move right into the action items and just move right into the school start time study vote. So I'm going to open up for public comment, thinking that a lot of people might be wrong, might have other things they want to comment on, but we're going to have our public comment period and just a couple of usual ground rules, which are that in order to give everybody a chance to speak who wishes to, we ask you to hold your remarks to about 3 minutes. And if you're here with a group of people with a similar message or on the same issue, if you want to team up and appoint a spokesperson, that would also be nice to save some time. And as I said at McCall, if there's, I know sometimes you have the impulse to clap or applaud, but that just kind of takes up time too, so we ask you to hold your applause for that. So if anybody's here for public comment, please come on forward, introduce yourself, and be sure to use the mic so that WinCam can capture what you say. Anybody here for public comment?
Hi, Pamela Court. I am the mother of 2 middle school students. You've heard me speak passionately about this topic. You've read the letter that I sent to all of you. I appreciate the time that you've spent hearing me and listening to me and reading my notes. And I just want to make a few additional remarks. I'd like to urge you all strongly to consider the recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has been looking at this issue for more than a few years. I urge you to strongly consider that the majority of the parents in this town, through a survey that you sent to them, preferred for the school start times to be later. I urge you to strongly consider the beacons that you set out through your strategic visioning initiative for the social and emotional well-being of our students and how a later school start time will support the priorities that were determined by the committee. Beacons that you pledged a commitment to use to drive decisions made on behalf of the students. I urge you to consider the recommendations made by the Start Time Committee, who spent hours and hours looking into this issue, and I urge you to consider the recommendation of the superintendent of this district, who you hired for her expertise on matters concerning our children's education. If you look for reasons why not to do it, you'll find them. There'll never be a time when challenges aren't present. At the last school committee meeting, which I watched on WinCam, one of the school committee members voiced concerns about issues with the buses. These concerns were addressed by our superintendent and was an example of how the committee and that you chose and the superintendent that you hired have spent a lot of time already considering these issues, their impact, and how they can be solved. Schools, sports, extracurriculars, buses, all of our hurdles that will be present next year, the year after that, and the year after that, they're all going to be there. The situation will never be perfect. The stars are never going to be aligned. But all of the evidence and all of the stakeholders point that the best decision for this district is to make the school start times later for our middle and high school students, and I urge you to do that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Pam.
Hi, I'm Isabel McGee. I've already written to you and talked to you about this before. Just one thing to say, if there's any possibility that you may be voting no with or to delay, could I, just state the obvious that, 180 days is a long time in the life of a kid. It goes by in a minute for us, but for kids, it's a long time. And I just think if you believe in doing this, then we should just do it this year, please, rather than next year. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ruthie Gagney. I'm Precinct 3. My family and I have been a resident here for almost 10 years. We have 3 children. I have a 9th grader at the high school, a 1st grader at Ambrose, and a preschool at VL. So you can imagine what my days are already like, my mornings and my afternoons. Are there hiccups now and again? Absolutely, but we get through it. We don't have a choice. We get through it. That's just the way it is. I don't think necessarily this evening the debate is so much as to whether or not to change the start time, but when. And there's a few things, I think, between the research, the scientific data, and the publications, and quite frankly, I've lost track of the number of pediatricians that are in support of this. I think that all the data points towards that this needs to be done. I think that the benefit that this will bring to our older students far, far, far outweighs the inconvenience that this will have on our younger children. There's a few things that I would like to mention, just to sort of bring up so that they're at the forefront of our mind. We need to remember that all students' schedules are going to change throughout their time here, whether they're going from no school to preschool, preschool to kindergarten, 5th to middle. There's going to be a change in their start time. There's going to be a change to the family's schedule. Families figure it out. They make it work. Are there hiccups? Yes, but they make it work. Additionally, people move. Whether it's within Winchester, within our own district, or into our own district, or into other towns, people move. Chances are there's going to be a different start time then. Again, families make it work. They rely on each other. They make it work. They figure it out. We need to also remember, too, that there are support programs that are in place or that are going to be in place for these families. Whether it's the busing the children to and from school, the before-school care, or the after-school programs, there are programs there. If for the families that need them, they can ask for them and they will be available. My concern is that this is going to get delayed to another year. My concern is that we're going to be thinking about this, talking about this, and meeting about this again at this time again next year. I hope, at least I hope that would be the best of the worst case scenario, because I wouldn't want it to disappear entirely. But my other concern is that we need to get this changed. We need to get this changed for next year because we need to also now start thinking about the homework situation. That should be our next priority. We need to finish this, move on, and go on. And lastly, I don't need to remind all of you of this, but we do need to also remember that we are 8th in the country. We've all seen the numbers, whether it's the school, student ratio, whether it's the amount of money spent per child, the income, things like that. The numbers don't add up, but somehow we are 8th, and we are rocking it, and we are rocking it with sports. We're rocking it. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that we value our children, their well-being, and their education. We are a town that talks the talk. Let's be a town that walks the walk. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you. So, just to tee this up, the school time study committee presented their findings and recommendations at the last meeting. There were some questions around the bus schedule and about, I think, wraparound care that kind of came out of that. Do you guys have anything to update us on that we should know about? I know that, you developed this grid of the considerations and that the work is ongoing to understand what the issues are and what the possible impacts are. I just wanted to give you guys a chance to present anything.
So Cindy had submitted some questions, and I would like to commend the many members of the public who've taken the opportunity to let us know identify what the challenges are and to support the social emotional well-being of children, and that we all have the same goal in the end. It's just a question of the logistics associated with this change to be sure that we've thought of everything. And so it's really helpful for people to propose questions. So Cindy had submitted some questions, and one was around the decisions we'd made to start the elementary schools earlier than the middle and high school. And Michelle was the one who worked most closely. So there were 4 or 5 questions, I think, categories of questions, and I'll talk about the others. But Michelle was the one who looked at the research most closely around the elementary impact of earlier start times. And so maybe you could just walk us through quickly why we made the recommendation to start the elementary schools at 8:10 to 2:20 and make that shift.
Absolutely.
Rather than later.
Absolutely. So we probably didn't get a chance to go into it too much in depth with our brief presentation last week, but we started from the idea that we were really committed as a committee to starting the middle and high schools at 8:30. That was really our starting point. That is really where all the research points us, and we felt as a committee that if we were going to make a significant change in people's personal lives, that we really wanted to choose a time that had a research base behind it. And so the 8:30 start time for middle and high school seemed to be the way to go. There are a few other schools that have adjusted that time, maybe by 10 or 5, 10, 15 minutes earlier, or even later in some cases. That personal decisions, district decisions have driven them to do that. Some of their schools actually get out later than ours do. So with an 8:30 start, they would be pushing some of them close to 3:30 with their end times. So we really started from the premise of 8:30, and then we looked at the question of elementary school from there. And we went back and we dug pretty deeply into some of the elementary research. And we found that it wasn't actually particularly all that deep. So while there was a tremendous amount of research supporting an 8:30 start time, pretty much across the board from, as you've heard many times, from the American Academy of Pediatrics and on, there was actually no recommendation on start time for elementary school. The work that has been done has looked at sleep science research, which indicated that the circadian shift that happens to our middle and high schoolers has not yet happened, that the younger kids are still on an earlier cycle. We looked at what time a lot of our other schools in the area, when they are moving, what they are moving to, and most of them are either already at early elementary school start times or moving to earlier elementary school start times. We looked at the research, the small body of research that does exist on elementary school start times. Even I've gone as far as contacting one of the authors of the research to say, is there any recommendation you can give us on elementary school start time? And basically the response back was 8 a.m. or after is all they're able to say for elementary school currently. So from that, we then looked at our survey data from our parents. And we saw that more parents would require childcare if we moved to the elementary time later that don't already have it than if we moved it earlier. Fewer parents would require childcare that they don't already have. I think that was 21% versus 31%. And then we also looked at we had put a dipstick down to see what kinds of times felt comfortable to people for elementary start times, and those also leaned more heavily towards preference towards 8:30 a.m. or earlier. 9 a.m. was actually the least popular start time of any of them, so we were trying to back off of the 9 a.m. as much as possible. A lot of parents in their written comments had concerns, and in the emails that we received had concerns about the ability to be able to get to work at a 9 a.m. start time, that it would require extended childcare before school that they don't already have versus maybe a shorter period of childcare that they have. It might increase transitions for students, and transitions are particularly challenging for our youngest kids, where they would have to possibly go from a home care setting to a child care setting to a classroom setting. Whereas a lot of parents felt that with the 8 a.m., heading towards the 8 a.m. start time, was would allow them to go from home to school, thereby eliminating a transition for those younger kids. And we thought that was valuable as well. And then we went out to the community and we had the conversations with all the PAs and the community forum. And what we then heard from people was 8 a.m. At 8 a.m. just sounded much too early to a lot of people. It was a 45-minute shift for two of our elementary schools. And we tried to respond to that by then going back and looking at our bus schedule and our and what we could do, and that's when that's how we determined the 8:10 start time for the elementary kids. That was as late as we felt we could push it and still maintain the busing schedule that we currently had. And at that, we were only 20 minutes away from 3 of our elementary school start times. 3 of them now start at 8:30, and 8:10 just sounded much closer to the time. It's only a 20-minute shift for them on the morning and only a 10-minute shift in the afternoon, and that kept them as close to their original school day as possible. And we also did have a desire as a district to keep all the elementary schools. We heard both from the teachers and the administration to keep all the elementary schools on the same start time, because it makes it much less challenging for scheduling professional development. It's a much better use of the teachers' time after school to not show up and then have to potentially wait for other elementary school teachers to arrive. So it was a lot of factors that were involved in arriving at the decision.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do you have any follow-up questions about that before?
No, not really. That's helpful, though.
Sure. The second group of questions revolve around wraparound care, and
some of that we discussed. So I don't think that's as much.
You're okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Yeah. I think my question is really around, in terms of wraparound care, is really around, how can we make that time that we have with the kids, especially for those kids who don't benefit from a later start time, how can we make that as valuable as possible, whether that's having more guidance counselors come in earlier so they're providing services or activities, or whether there's opportunity for physical activity like Kids Bach, or so that it's not just sort of supervisory time, but it's actually focused on the reason why we're doing this.
Right.
It's wrap around to the concept of wellness.
Right. So I think that's an excellent point. If this were to be approved tonight, in short order, we'd have surveys going out that are pretty detailed for elementary parents or potential elementary parents around what kind of services would you like to see, both short-term and long-term. The wraparound care is sort of a short-term solution, a flexible solution that would allow families to have a wider drop-off pickup time, but also for our staff members, many of whom have students in the district, allow them to do their after-school meetings and know that their children are well cared for. So ideas for how structured or unstructured that wraparound time should be, some potential costs associated with it, how frequently would it be used, so that we could get some idea about staffing and then partner likely with an outside group to help us manage that in terms of folks who are already experienced with before and after school care.
Is that your preference?
I think that's my preference, is to work in close partnership with someone who's already doing care in town. But I have run my own extended school program that's really a full extended school program, as has Alan. And so both options are open to us. There are some more personnel challenges around hiring your own people and managing them, whereas if they work for another town department, it sometimes makes that a little easier, fewer hurdles to jump. So it really will greatly depend on the feedback that we get about usage. We already have before and after school programs at several of our elementary schools, and so we may not even need to have wraparound at those schools, or we may need to just shift slightly what they're doing. So it really will vary by school. Okay. For instance, Kids Corner is piloting something at Ambrose now before school, which has a pretty small group of students enrolled, but if it were structured differently, would we have more families taking advantage of it? And maybe it's just a sort of a startup thing. So
how many students do we serve breakfast to?
I don't know that we really have a formal. There's Dennis could talk about breakfast at the high school.
We start serving breakfast at 6:45 in the morning.
And how many kids do you think take advantage of the breakfast?
It would be anecdotal. I mean, I see a lot of kids eating muffins and getting hot drinks. It definitely amps up once kids get off the bus and they're about to enter the classroom. So it's hard to tell. I mean, there's plenty of kids eating, and I don't know if they're eating because the food's available or if they haven't had breakfast yet. But
So
I
Ellen
sort of
could
meant the
probably,
free
I
and
think that's
reduced
great.
lunch folks.
Yeah.
No, it's just more the free and reduced
little
lunch
ones.
folks that we need to serve breakfast to.
And
I
we've
was
had
wondering-
that program at Lynch, have we not?
We've tried it at various schools, is my understanding, and it hasn't been well subscribed in terms of participation. But I think that if we had a flexible wraparound and parents knew that their children could have a quiet 15 or 20 minutes to eat a healthy breakfast, we might encourage that.
And
So-
perhaps a cohort to eat with as well.
Right, and make it a little more social. So I wish I had more specifics on the wraparound care, but until I gain more information, it's hard for me to.
I think you
Give those.
did say at some point you were thinking of kind of working with the rec department as one of these
Yep.
outside groups. It's-
Right,
Yeah.
right. So we're just going to look
Yeah.
at where the capacity is.
Different options.
So the next category is athletics. So there continue to be uncertainties about the impact on the practice schedules. So practice schedules for athletics are something that the AD works hard to plan as far ahead as possible, but sometimes you don't know who the coaches are.
Sure.
So coaching availability often determines when your practice time is as well, or has an influence on that. We will be bringing on several fields online, and so despite the sort of shift a little bit later, we have more options for places for kids to practice now that Skillings will be open and at least one grass field will be sodded and ready to go. We're working out final details on the hockey availability and practice time. Most of our a lot of the teams practice indoors in the winter, and we obviously share weight room space and indoor practice space for the first part of the spring season as well because of the weather being bad outside. And so I don't have a sample athletic practice schedule because there are so many variables, but all of the other towns in the league that have already moved to a later time, we can learn from their experiences and consult with some of the other districts across the state that have moved to a later time to see what their hurdles were when they changed as well. It's easier to plan the games because all of the whole league has moved later, and so the games that are right after school or meets or events right after school will go a little later. The one important variable that is in our favor is that our travel distances are much less than in other parts of the state. If you're in Western Mass or Central Mass, you're really spending a lot of time traveling. And when I was a coach in New Hampshire, there weren't a lot of large high schools, so we had to travel great distances for multiple hours for some of our cross country in particular, racing the clock to get there before dark. So I can remember those days well. So athletics is obviously one of the biggest challenges of moving. And we hope that more well-rested students will be healthier and less injury prone and able to participate at high levels as they are now.
And the lights
So
that we're
the-
running will go on which fields? Just the turf fields, the one at Cha-Cha and then the one over at Knowlton?
So there are multiple plans afoot around lights. I know that there's a group in town very actively fundraising to try to provide first lights at Manchester and then lights at Skillings. The provisions were made when the Skillings turf field was put in for lights.
Right.
The installation of lights is way more expensive than you would think it would be. You would think it would be easy. But I met with the town manager today, and they're considering several options for cost sharing with the fundraising group, possibly, and putting something forward to try to ideally install lights on both fields by next fall. Mark Correa, I think was it last meeting or 2 meetings ago, said that he preferred to use them on the turf field at Skillings that's next to the high school rather than at Manchester Field. And so he has provided for 12 weeks of rental, like staying there in the fall and 8 in the spring. And certainly we can take another look at that plan if one field or the other is lit by donations and/or town funding. So we'll have to take a look at that. But that's a tremendous benefit. They're not just lights that are brought in for the game, short term. Here today, gone tomorrow. He has built into his budget enough to rent them for the whole duration of the 12 weeks and stay there. So,
Thank you.
any other questions on athletics?
Could you just refresh my memory about what has been done at Skillings? Is it correct that it's the electrical conduit and the actual bases for
Yes, that's my understanding.
And there are 8 lights?
There are only 4 required at Manchester, and I think it's 8.
I think it's 8 at Skillings.
Yeah.
But
So it's
part of it is already done at Skillings.
right. But
Okay.
the installation is less expensive at Manchester because there are only 4.
There are only 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Complicated.
So, you had a question? Yes.
I think I can add a little context. I believe that baseball, the height of the ball determines the height of the required lighting. And since they don't have
right.
that type of activity at Manchester, it's a different setup. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Ah.
Second thing is
Good information.
comment on the transportation. I think it's wise to keep a lot of activities right next to the high school where the kids are. That'll eliminate a lot of the after-school traffic. So that's something that should be investigated.
And then you can start sooner, right?
And then the last thing, I wonder if you can comment on, there was a lot of comments that received addressing the prior to school activities. And is that something we can control? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a great question and worth repeating. So the consensus of the School Start Time Study Committee was that we want to strongly discourage before school activity where possible in order to meet our goal of having students get more and better sleep. And so I would discourage moving club activity or sports activity practices before school unless it's unavoidable. So we investigated changing the swim time at the pool, and the only time available is the same time they currently have. So unless we switch pools, which I would encourage, if that were feasible, if there was something local to mix it up a bit so those students could get a little more sleep. The idea is that over time, once we've made the adjustment, there may be some things that shift, the day shifts because of the needs of the group. And certainly lots of kids come to school early now, even at the 7:45 start, to meet with teachers. But this will allow that to be their choice and not my choice forcing them to be there. And so that's, I think, a big advantage. So I've directed the AD to try to look to keep as much after school as possible, but to start games and practices as close to the end of school as is reasonable so that the other end of the day doesn't stretch out longer than it needs to be.
Susan, I had one comment on athletics. Just, and I've said this, I think, at the last meeting, so I just want to be sure I put in the footnote. So we've made a commitment in terms of process. We talk about lights at Skillings, just as we had a community conversation that resulted in policy to permit lights at Knowlton Stadium. We've committed to the same process at Skillings, and I think we owe it to the community to do that. There's certainly time to do that, but I want to just remind the committee we've made that commitment. I think that's important for that community and those abutters that we make good on that.
Okay, the last category, and I think a parent mentioned this tonight, is homework. And the perception or reality or both that a large amount of student stress is caused by the schedule and the volume of homework, that many of our students are doing multiple hours per day, 3-4 hours of homework every day. So I know Dennis is here, and he started a conversation with his faculty members today about homework. Our district advisory group has started a study of homework, and I sent something out today. So that's a cross-section of teachers across the district, and we decided to focus on grading practices and homework as 2 topics that we're going to explore. But I think we need to launch a more formal committee with stakeholders from as many student grade levels as are affected by homework, parents, teachers, administrators. I have a feeling this is going to be a lengthy process where we re-educate ourselves about the purpose for homework, what the research says, the value of homework, get feedback on homework, and then make some recommendations to address that. And I think it's going to take a longer conversation because of the nature of our highly regarded and terrific teaching faculty, our incredible kids who will do anything asked of them, and our position and relative position in terms of performance. No one wants us not to be among the best high schools in the state or the nation, or the best district in the state or the nation. We would just like our students to be a little more well-balanced and healthy at the same time that they're high-performing. And we think you can have both. We think there is a way to reduce the out-of-school requirement and still have kids engaged and learning and critical thinking and collaborating with others in a way that's more productive. But it's going to be a journey. And so it's certainly on our minds, and we have committed to doing that. Any other questions on homework or anything else related to the start time proposal?
I just kind of like us to kind of step back for a minute, because I occasionally, when I'm listening to reading all the emails that I get, or listening to all the debate, which is all very, worthwhile and so obvious how much we all care and want to do this the right way. But just let's keep in mind that Winchester is a town of, I think, 6 square miles. We have 5 elementary schools that are districted in a way so that they are kind of in the middle of a neighborhood. They're not, all the 3rd graders in one part of town and the 5th graders in another part of town and buses crossing around. We have neighborhood elementary schools, 5 of them, 1 high school, 1 middle school, and they're relatively close to one another in the middle of our town. So it seems like we have a fairly simple paradigm here that we could really, with a lot of effort and planning, we could really make this work. So I'm hopeful we can do that. Did you have a comment or a question or
Sure,
something
I'd
you
love
wanted
to share an
segue
observation.
into? Yeah.
I'd love to sort of jump into this and say, although, the public comment tonight was very much on sort of one side of this issue, we heard from both sides at our meeting at McCall.
Oh, yeah.
I thought those comments were all really very thoughtful, very sincere. I know it sometimes maybe some buttons got pushed. I think that was inadvertent. I don't think anyone really meant to disparage anyone at the microphone. So I really appreciated that opportunity to hear from everyone. I think I have received, I'm guessing, 100 or more emails from folks. Some of that was a form letter that got tweaked, but very, very many were original and authentic on both sides. It's worth, I can't resist just sharing, though, out of those nearly 100 communications, I think maybe 6 actually asked me what I was thinking and how I was inclined to vote. And I reached out to every one of them, and I really enjoyed those conversations. So to the sort of one-way messaging that we've all sort of been hearing, I will just be candid and say one of the biggest surprises to me in this whole process has been the number of people who thought it was necessary to email us with links to studies and remind us about what the American Academy of Pediatrics did with their position paper 3 or 4 years ago. It was a surprise to me because we're already there. And I would say we've been there since at least January of 2016. When Judy was a very new superintendent here, she brought to us the statement that at that time was going around the district. It hadn't been signed by everyone, but it's the expression that everyone has seen. She shared that with us, and the school committee said not why, but actually said, why not sooner? I was sitting where Cindy was, and I remember there was discussion about why do we need to wait? Why don't we do it for the 17-18 school year? So there was a lot of discussion about that. We had a lot going on. We had obviously a new superintendent, building relationships. We were talking about all-day kindergarten. I'm sure we were in the midst of budget, either for operating or capital.
Oh, we are.
And Judy quite, eloquently explained the logistics around making a change like this with other districts can be complicated. So we talked a lot about athletics and the need for you to work with your peers and Mark to work with his peers. And I think we sort of accepted that. Mm-hmm. But it was very clear to me, and I wanted to say this because I think there were some comments at McCall the other night. There were some speakers who said, I was surprised. I thought this was a done deal. And I got to say, we wish it was a done deal for this school year, because we're all there. Now, Michelle wasn't with us at the time, but I know you're there too. So there's been absolutely no change of philosophy. on this. So, and I apologize for that too. I would say somehow that message was lost. I don't know how. Maybe it needed more care and feeding on the part of all of us. So I was speaking recently with someone who I know and respect on policy matters in this district, and she said maybe what the school committee could have done and should have done some time ago was to vote to make this change by a date certain, as the moderator is fond of saying, and we could have established a committee to identify the various hurdles to be cleared, the impacts that needed to be either resolved or mitigated, as well as the costs associated with this transition, however significant or insignificant, direct or indirect. But we didn't do that. So here we are today, and although there was clearly public comment on one side, as recently as 2 hours ago, I'm getting really thoughtful emails from folks who really oppose any kind of transition, regardless of whether it's 18 or 19. So I actually am going to say tonight, I think there is value. There's still value in us making a clear statement tonight on the science, the benefits, and the need to get there in a way that frames the conversation tonight very quickly. It focuses us as we go around the table. So I move to approve a later instructional day start time of 8:30 a.m. for our secondary students at Winchester High School and McCall Middle School to be implemented no later than September of 2019 in accordance with the spring 2016 joint statement on later start times from the Middlesex League superintendents, as well as on the recommendation of the American Academy of Pediatrics and other science authorities whose research makes clear the benefit of an adjusted schedule to better accommodate the changing sleep and wakefulness patterns of adolescents and their ability and preparedness to learn.
I'd be happy to second that motion.
I guess, yeah, for the purposes of discussion, I guess we need a second, so. I'm kind of uncomfortable with that just being the only thing we do, so.
And it need not be the only thing we do.
And I would say that I agree with Susan, and what makes me uncomfortable about that is the way you began the history, which is that you agreed that way back, well before I was here, that it was a necessary thing to do and that it should be studied and moved forward, and yet here we sit a year later and it still hasn't moved forward. And that we have now formed a working group, we have studied it, we have identified what a lot of the major issues are, and we have plans for working towards those issues now. So I would say that now is the time to act on those issues and to, if we really want to make a statement that we support our kids' social and emotional health, that we need to move forward now. And so I would amend the motion to accept the recommendations of the working group for 2018-2019.
Okay, so we have a motion and a motion to amend the main motion. And the amendment is to accept recommendations of the study committee.
Mm-hmm.
Is anybody going to second that amendment, the motion to amend? Yeah, what do we do?
So I think you probably, your choice is either to vote on the main motion or to have a second of the amended motion. But let me just ask for clarification. So is the resistance to put a timeline that's beyond this year because the risk of losing momentum, or because the work that needs to be done has to begin and we can't allow that work to be given any sort of slippage or length of time?
I'd say both of those issues. I think that by taking a position in a statement, it gives us a deadline to move forward. I think that extending that deadline is only going to lead to the slippage that you just talked about.
Okay. And if I could, through the chair,
Mm-hmm.
follow up. So is there no risk or no cost that would be too high to postpone?
Can you tell me more about that?
So if we go forward and the committee comes back and says it needs hundreds of thousands of dollars, or it has grave concerns about programming or wraparound, do we still go forward?
I think we would have identified those issues. Can you speak to that, Dr. Evans?
So I can't imagine any circumstance that would require hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost. Certainly there are some unknowns around, will we need additional buses? Additional buses are $60,000 right now, according to our contract. We do have some flexibility in the afternoon with some additional provision to add a couple of afternoon buses next year if we need to. That's already built into the budget. But the wraparound program is going to be self-funded, as all extended school programs are. And so while we'll have to structure the costs carefully and watch for the first few months to make sure that we're charging the least we can to make it self-funded, I think that's something we've had significant experience with in other districts, and so I'm not too concerned about that. I can't imagine any other costs associated with this unless there were, there could possibly be contractual costs if we were to defer that would raise the personnel costs in the long run. And I think that's a concern for me. I think Chris makes a good point. You want to know as much as possible before you make a decision like this. But the impact of making a change sometimes isn't known until you make it. And so until people have to commit to telling me whether or not they need a bus pass next year, they need to know what time school will be next year. For me to survey now for a year from now, you don't have the right people in the right seats because their children may be graduated or they may be moving schools. And so it's really hard to be planful when there's no sort of sense of urgency about it. So the two major unknowns are how many people use wraparound, how are we going to structure that, transportation, what the impact is on transportation, and athletics. And until we actually experience it and seek alternative practice spaces or ice time, pushing it out a year doesn't get me any more information than I have now or that I can obtain within the 7 months that remain before we have to implement this. So I don't see any advantages to waiting a year, and I see significant disadvantages because the knowns are still going to be unknown knowns, as Susan said last
We
time.
have some known unknowns.
The known unknowns.
You're trying to reduce the number of unknown unknowns. And
Right. So that's the challenge. And certainly there are no union costs that have been identified because this is within the existing union contracts.
Can I just make an important, I want to clarify, I want to underscore something, and it was a subtlety, but maybe I didn't read it with enough enunciation. The motion I've made is not to do this for September of 19. The motion I made is to implement it no later than September of 19. And some of what we're beginning to talk about is really interesting stuff that I hope we will keep talking about tonight, because if this motion were to pass, it both supports the joint statement of the Middlesex superintendents, although it gets a little more specific, Michelle, with respect to start time. As you know, that statement was between 8 and 8:30. So this is sort of accepting, if you will, the recommendation of the committee. This doesn't even talk about elementary school, and we need to talk about that. So this, I think, takes an important step, again, to the community who maybe is unsure whether or not we even support this, conceptually, ideologically. I think this is an important step to take. It frames that continued discussion. This does not rule out 18.
I think it's an unfair thing to do to our community and our teachers, I have to say. I think that saying that making a statement of no later than 2019 leaves a decision hanging over people's heads. I think it's not taking a firm commitment on 2018 versus 2019 as implementation. I think it leaves open the possibility that it still would not happen in 2018. It could possibly be 2019. I think that parents need to be able to arrange for childcare. They need to be able to arrange their work schedules, and the same for teachers. And I think that it's tough to make a commitment, but I think we need to make a commitment one way or the other. I think that we need to leave people enough time to plan. And I think that by saying no later than 2019 doesn't allow people to do that. It still leaves the possibility open. that it would not occur.
So I struggle with that somewhat. I'm not sure how that's unfair to anyone. Remember, it doesn't even say anything about elementary school. So I guess what I'm trying to say tonight is I'm trying to find a way to get to a conversation about 18 in a way that's a two-step process, brings it much into clearer focus, and some of the issues that have already come up, we continue to talk about. There may be other questions. There may be perspectives on this that I haven't even considered.
I think the motion that you've presented, the initial motion, I seconded immediately because I feel like it makes a very strong statement to the community and gives the community what I've heard through my conversations people wanted, which is a definite decision as to how we feel about this concept and, as a goal. But it's a goal. And as much as we've been thinking about it for a long time, I think that there are some uncertainties that make it a difficult decision. I mean, this is a difficult decision for me personally because I've been tooting the horn of social emotional well-being for so long, but it's complicated. Yeah. And just as a side note, we know by research that the high school students will benefit from this. We know that. We know that to be true, and I support that motion because we know that to be true. But we also know that kids who are able to engage in after-school activities, kids who are able to engage in physical activities, that has a tremendous impact on their social emotional well-being. I mean, we talk about homework not because homework is just the next thing that we need to address, but because when we think about the social emotional well-being of our students, it has to be, it has to consider all the facets of what makes them joyful. And some of that is being able to engage in these other activities. For some kids, it may be going out for the cross-country team. That may be where they get their joy or their social network. And I want to be thoughtful and respectful to give time to have that conversation. I don't believe it has to take a year. In fact, I think that in very short order we could figure out what we need to know. But I think that saying it's a goal and saying it's a plan are two very different things. And so I would like to see more of the plan, more of the understanding and the listening and the processing of all of the feedback that we're getting. I completely agree that the School Start Time Committee has done a tremendous amount of work. But I also know that one meeting on a Tuesday after Thanksgiving does not a community conversation make. And so I want to be thoughtful and respectful to make sure that we're not rushing it because it's too important for us to rush, quite frankly. And so my goal is to make sure that this happens, but my goal is also to make sure that we're thoughtful and respectful in thinking through all the components. And respecting, Judy, that you're the administrative body, and I've always said the goal of the school committee is nose in and hands out. But I think that there's some creative opportunities here. I think that there's some tremendous benefits that could be gained on a whole host of issues by thinking creatively about this, but there might be some budget implications, and those budget implications are the one area where the school committee does put their hands in and does lean in a little bit more. So I appreciate the motion, and I appreciate it as a statement, and I would hope that a secondary motion would include the plan, the actual plan for what this is going to look like. And I appreciate that you don't know who's going to need preschool and that, or wraparound care and who's going to be needing buses and the rest of it. But I don't think I'm alone in saying that there's some other issues that I'd like more information about.
And I guess, Cindy, I appreciate everything that you said, and I don't disagree about the social and emotional benefits to sports and after-school activities and of course, we want to be able to make sure those are also an important part of our kids' lives and that we're not denying those. I guess the point at which I have some reservations is exactly in your words, a goal. I think it was a goal of the school committee in 2016. I think we would just, by the motion that's been presented, we're just, again, making it a goal. It's not, there is no end line by saying it is our goal, basically, to have it, in your own words, to have the start time changed by 2019. And
At
that,
the latest.
right. But it's still just a goal.
I mean, I think it was one of our goals for this
Right.
school
It
year.
was
a district goal.
The
Right, it
district
was a goal for this school year to have it by, it was written within our policy this year
Yeah,
for the district,
Would
that
it-
it was a goal to implement by 2018.
Would it be helpful if I just read the motion one more time? Because the word goal does not appear in the motion. And I want to just be clear
No, it
that
just-
everybody
it just-
heard
It's
it.
the implication.
Not later than,
the-
right?
Yeah.
Understood, but, motions are motions, and it's what goes down on the paper. So
Yeah.
if it's helpful, I'm happy to read it again. I don't need to if everybody heard it.
Well, I mean, you and I batted around some ideas earlier today, and I think we're still, I appreciate Cindy's need to know more about the plan and the potential costs, and Chris's, I respect all you guys, have been through many of these things, to know more about the costs and how high will they be, and do we really know?
Yeah.
And yet, I think that it's hard to know what those costs are going to be until you have an actual start time.
Right.
So,
So for
I
me, in
guess-
terms of the person implementing this, I appreciate the effort to have clarity around whether or not the school committee supports this move. What would be really helpful to me is to have a specific vote to say, is it going to be implemented as the committee recommended in 2018? Or is it going to be deferred till 2019? And then we can speak to whether or not there's support for moving it forward in 2018, which will require a substantial amount of work to be sure we identify all the possible issues that folks have. Although I think School Start Time Study Committee started meeting, I think, in September. And so we've already put lots of months of discussion in place around this. So sort of a theoretical, I appreciate supporting the concept, but for me to implement this effectively and start planning, I second the notion that our staff members and our parent community needs to know as soon as possible what the plan is for next September. So that's just my recommendation. And I really think another year, unless we implement it, is not going to get us any further than we are today in terms of knowing more about the cost implications. So.
And I'd like to say, too, that I appreciate that, Judy, and I don't think that if we choose to implement in 2018, that means any of the good thinking or feedback or input stops here either. I actually think that is just the onus and motivation for more input and good thinking and creative thinking, and continuing to take feedback from the community on how to make it work for people, because then once it's not an idea, once it becomes a policy, then people in their own minds can start to plan and really identify not just potential issues for themselves, but what the actual issues are going to be. And so that we're sort of we're not chasing different ideas too, we're chasing actual problems that we need to solve.
and again, if we were to vote to amend the motion, that would then have it be not only accepting the recommendation of the American Academy of Pediatrics and changing the secondary school start time, but also accepting the recommendation for the whole district. We could go on and do something else that would set up more of a dialogue around the plan, set up some kind of a report, some expectations from the superintendent, to better quantify what our possible cost increases might be. I mean, we don't have to stop with just accepting the recommendation of the study committee. We could also have another motion that would set up something that would,
Absolutely.
provide more clarity around the costs.
Absolutely.
You hit it on the head. I mean, if this motion passes, I don't expect we're jumping right in to talk about McCall Phase 2. And we have a lot of discussion here about how we could make it work and how we might do it for 18 and where they are still maybe questions or ideas. And I look forward to that discussion.
Okay. So
Is there language that you would suggest around that, or?
I think he and I talked about it, yeah. So I guess, as the chair, I guess I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment.
There's no second yet.
Oh, there's no second yet. All right, well,
Can I make a suggestion?
yep.
So, hearing all of this, and I think that what we're all experiencing is the complications are real and the change is big, so we want to have a good and successful implementation.
Yeah.
And I think that can start with the motion being to accept the recommendation of the committee as opposed to put in something that is a little less clear and gives the indication or any sort of, flexibility. So I think that I would be inclined to sort of, and this is up to the chair, I think we should request that we draw the initial motion and have a motion that represents the committee's belief that this would be the right thing to do, and do it now.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chris,
nobody-
I didn't hear the end of your sentence.
So I would say, if you put in no later than,
Yeah.
let's remove the doubt. Let's make the motion to accept the recommendation of the committee and implement it by 2018. Or 19, sorry.
Oh, by 19.
So, implemented by.
I'm going to ask you to clarify that one more time. It was either that or the air. I want to be sure I heard you.
I'd say remove the doubt by removing the sort of no later than.
Yeah.
And just make the recommendation that we accept the recommendation of the committee.
The study committee.
And then you could have another motion to suggest how the path forward could be best brought back to this table on a regular basis and how the superintendent can inform us how we're taking on these challenges and addressing them, and putting together a comprehensive implementation plan.
So not just doing it, but doing it well.
Right,
Yeah, which is at the
That
heart
makes
of what we're
sense.
talking about.
right.
That would be my sort of suggestion, to eliminate any sort of, second guessing or identifying additional problems to help, pull us backwards as opposed to forwards.
Okay. So,
Sorry.
I don't have a second for the motion to amend. And you're suggesting that Chris change the first motion, or with,
Perhaps he could withdraw his motion and we could have another motion.
I'll withdraw the motion with the hope that we can then go around the table and talk in a little more detail about kind of where we are on this and the questions that we have.
well, you had developed, a very comprehensive, thoughtful list of the
Yeah.
things. And I agree that there needs to be a thoughtful
Yeah.
list of the areas you wanted more clarity on.
Right.
So,
So you want me to kick that off?
Yeah.
You want to go to someone else?
You,
So I might begin this by going back to my comment at McCall the other night when I was when I was trying to explain the distinction between the time it takes to figure something out. And I agree with many people in the audience, there's plenty of time between now and September 1st. There's absolutely enough time to figure this out for 18. However, we don't have the luxury of September because families need to know, daycare providers need to know. So there's sort of two attributes to this, right? There's sort of the logistical piece, meaning who, what, when, where, and then there's the financial piece. So that's an even shorter time frame, given that since we last talked about this at McCall, we've actually voted a budget for FY19. And we haven't included any additional funds in that budget to support school start time. So and Michelle and Judy know this, I appreciate all the work, and Ellen as well, that they've done on this, particularly like around busing. I can appreciate great effort has been made to find a way to make this change be cost neutral, as Judy's described it. When we first spoke really in a substantive way, maybe it was a couple of months ago, might have actually been your update to the committee about what the study committee was up to, what the schedule looked like. And Judy, I think you'd made a remark, maybe I had made the request that could we please get a sense of what the cost would be before we vote the FY19 budget to be sure that we can incorporate that in. Judy, you had replied, my intention is for it to be cost neutral. But I think for me anyway, my reaction was, let's not prejudge that because this is really something that's important and worth doing. And so even if we could find a way to do it for free, that may not be, number one, the best way to do it. And number two, that might not even be realistic. And I'm saying that because, and I don't know that everyone in the audience appreciates this because a lot of people turned out for the discussion at McCall on Tuesday. Many of them probably took the survey on world language that Judy sent out. What are your priorities? What are your student priorities? We had a lengthy discussion at this table Thursday about expanding world language. That was a school committee priority. It's something that Judy came into this district saying was important to her, and she came out with a proposed budget, a recommended budget for 2.4 additional FTEs to expand world language to 6th grade and add Mandarin. This committee took it out because we didn't feel we had enough resources for continued enrollment growth, and we felt we weren't really sort of living up to the expectations in our visioning around supporting our students' social and emotional health. That was a very meaningful and important conversation, but the sentiment was made clear by our former finance committee member that this is going to be a very, very difficult year. And so we made, it was not in sort of, it's not really an easy decision to make. I know we made the right decision. It's frustrating to me. It may be frustrating. I'm sure it's frustrating to the people on your World Language Study Committee who put all this time into this. The point I would make to anyone watching and with us tonight is this committee didn't believe we couldn't afford 2.4 FTE for world language and make these other investments that were just maybe a slightly higher priority. So when I think about the elements like busing, and Judy and Ellen and Michelle well know, I spent some time in December looking at how the busing might work. I've looked at some of the more recent bus schedules that Ellen has forwarded, primarily just what we're getting from the bus company. So I want to be clear about, where it's coming from. I've driven some of these bus routes. Some of them seem reasonable. Some of them don't. On a Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I can't drive these bus routes in that amount of time. And these buses are going to run during rush hour. And I will tell you that a bus that shows up, a bus that arrives at Lynch at 7:55 in the morning with 30 kids that it has to get off, isn't going to show up 3 doors down from Nate's house near the Woburn line in 5 minutes, because I've tried that. But these are all sort of like, this is even lower than being into the weeds. Lower than being into the weeds. The point is that, and Judy has commented, we may need to make some adjustments. Totally agree. We're going to have to make some adjustments around all-day K, given what the enrollment was there too. But we can certainly make some reasonable assumptions. I question how realistic some of the busing planning is, not from Ellen, not from Michelle, maybe from our bus provider. I'm concerned that in September we may find we need to add a bus. And there will be a significant cost for that that would mean something else, falls out of the budget. With respect to the wraparound care, we've talked about that a little bit tonight. Judy's been very clear it should be self-sustaining, and I appreciate that. I think there are, and we've talked about this, there are different ways to do it, right? Very different models. In some models, there still may actually be an impact on our budget. So, but there's some models that wouldn't be. I think we've talked about the appreciation for some sort of supervision. Not clear to me if the supervisory position is on the balance sheet or off the balance sheet. I would say maybe as an analogy that we don't have bus drivers and we don't have any buses. So we contract that out. But when things go wrong with the buses, very few parents call the bus company. They will if somebody lost a jacket on a bus. But usually the phone call comes to Judy or to Nancy or to Ellen or us at the table. So I think there needs to be some understanding that with respect to wraparound care, I'd like to know more about what do we mean when we say supervision? Do we hold that? And is there not, just like we have some folks who spend a significant amount of their time, right, managing the busing, and they're district employees, is there not a cost for that task? I don't think we need to go hire somebody. We'd probably, Ellen, just throw that on top of you as yet another thing you'd have to be responsible for. But, I'm sort of trying to identify the kinds of things that I think if I saw a more detailed plan, one might say, that's a 0.2 FTE. We need, that's going to take some time. And I would argue, and I think I said this, I hope I said this Tuesday at McCall, this is such an important thing worth doing that it's okay if it costs something. I'd like to have a better sense of what it costs, and then I will do everything I can to get it into and work with FinCom and town meeting to get it into our budget on top of what we just voted. And I'm going to make her blush, but I want to call her out because she's here tonight. Pam Court comes to a lot of our meetings. She watches a lot on WinCam. She communicates with us about the things she has opinions on. I really appreciate her engagement. But Pam said something at the McCall meeting that was really important. She said, I'm a town meeting member. I wish there were more parents and more folks who kind of want to tell us what the right thing is to do, who are willing to go up and stand in front of another 191 people and say, this is important, you need to support this. Pam and a lot of other people like Pam do that, and I really respect and appreciate that. So I guess I won't go into all the other sort of elements, but I would say that I think there are elements of this that I feel are still not back at the starting blocks, Michelle. It's not at the goal stage. It's working towards a plan. I think some of it's more detailed than others. Some of it's maybe more conceptual. I would offer this. I've been thinking about when have we taken risks because they were the right thing to do? When were there financial risks? And two things came to my mind. When we made the move to really develop our in-house learning centers, specialized learning centers, that took an additional investment. We worked very hard with FinCom and town meeting to make that case. There was risk. The risk was it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to be successful. And the students would come back and then leave. But we had a defined sort of risk. We knew what the financial risk was. It was those additional FTEs. More recently, when we got the support for all-day K, we also knew what the risk was. And we did it because it was absolutely the right thing to do. But we made some assumptions based on, the inputs that Judy got and all the surveys. And based on those assumptions, we said, this is the plan. But we knew what the risk was. In this case, to me, it's a little bit different. This is the right thing to do. We need to change school start time. I'd like to do it for 18 if I could understand what the risk was. And I believe there may be some. Because I don't want to find out in September that one of those FTEs for social and emotional supports for students has to be an unfilled position. Because then I will feel horrible that we either didn't dig a little deeper, didn't push a little harder, didn't gather a little more information.
Okay, so that said, and knowing that you have some language that, you've worked out and you and I talked about earlier today, can you give us a motion to accept the recommendations of the study committee for implementation in September 2018 with the expectation, with the requirement that the superintendent develop a plan that, incorporates the elements that you've identified and that we talked about earlier this morning, the transportation, wraparound care, impact to academics, like the school, the elementary school music impact, identifying those elements and requiring the superintendent to identify any potential additional costs. And, can you?
So I'm almost there. The
Yeah.
motion that I brought tonight is to move to direct the superintendent to prepare a school start time transition plan for pre-K through 12th grade students to be presented to the school committee no later than Tuesday, March 20th for consideration of the recommendations of the school start time study committee for the 18-19 school year, and to identify additional resources required to supplement the FY19 school committee budget with the expectation that all such projected costs will be presented to the Finance Committee for discussion and inclusion in the recommended FY19 school department budget for spring town meeting. The plan shall clearly include, but is not limited to, transportation needs, wraparound childcare, including hours of operation, delivery model, and supervision, impacts on academics outside the instructional day and the costs to address them, such as elementary music, athletics, both practice and competition accommodations, district and non-district indirect costs, and the identification of any lost revenue, whether to the district or to the town of Winchester.
I didn't hear anything about accepting the recommendation of the start time committee.
It was at the beginning, wasn't it?
Say that again, Cindy?
It was at the beginning, I believe.
Yep.
It was at the beginning?
Yep.
Can you read that part again?
Yeah.
Move to direct the superintendent to prepare a start time transition plan for pre-K through 12th to be presented to the school committee no later than Tuesday, March 20th, for consideration of the recommendations of the school start time study committee for the 18-19 year.
That sounds to me like a motion to consider it again,
Yeah.
not to accept it right now.
No, what I heard was it's a motion to accept with a expectation of a March 20th transition plan.
To direct the superintendent to prepare a transition plan for presentation, a plan to present, I don't even know where the verb is.
In other words, Susan, if we take out the word present and say to be accepted on March 20th, I mean, it prejudges what, it's hard for me to sort of get, go 2 meetings out and say what it is we're going to do. The intention here is to say we've highlighted some things where some of us maybe want some additional information, not because we think we're going to say, aha, it's a bad idea, but to say we're either more comfortable with the idea that it really is cost neutral, or we've identified some costs, let's account for them in the budget so that we don't impact the things we just put in the budget last week.
And I appreciate the things that you want Dr. Evans and the administration to follow up on, Chris, but I have to say that I'm hearing it the same way Susan is. It sounds like we've just pushed off the vote to March 20th. It sounds like that.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you want to do, we can talk about that, but we either need to have a clear vote or no vote.
So this isn't just about kicking a can. This is saying looking for some additional information.
I appreciate that. I just
And I
also
might-
want to be clear to the community what it is we're doing.
Well, I get that. And again, I think if we had acted on the first motion, we might have made clear we're going to do it and we have to do it and it's important and we're not going to do it any later than 19. And then here is a way to say, can we now talk about what else do we need? What information might we need to be comfortable to do it for 18? We didn't act on that, so I get that. In the context of that not having been passed, I appreciate what you're saying.
I just think if it's conditional and we're not really going to know until until March 20th, and Judy wants to send out a survey, people are not going to take that seriously because the decision hasn't really been made. And it's already, if you have preschool kids and you need childcare, you need to be signing up for that now.
So again, I think if we had passed the original motion, it could be very clear. The superintendent could email families and say, the school committee has decided that we're going to move towards a later start time. This is going to happen. And you might get some input that could be useful in terms of whether they'd be depending on busing or wraparound childcare or what have you.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Could you ask the superintendent to give us her thoughts on what this, is this feasible? Is
Sure.
this something that could help us?
So there are a lot of people younger than I am in this room. I've been a school administrator since 1994. I've done schedules every year. I've projected enrollment. I've hired folks. I've done bus routes. I think all of the facets of this implementation are things that I'm well-versed in, that Ellen's well-versed in. It's a complex challenge in that there are some unknowns. in terms of changes in usage for the bus service, in implementation for the wraparound program, and impact on athletics should we need to transport or use different facilities, especially until all of our grass fields are fully functional, which will be one more year away. Some of the things on the list, I will not know by March 20th in any circumstance. We have a bus contract that's going out to bid. And there are lots of factors that go into what kind of a contract we line up to provide the services should we have the school start times changed. So when I say I'm confident that I can address any financial issues that are associated with slight shifts in the bus usage or providing to making sure that the wraparound care is self-supporting, I'm pretty confident that we can make that work. I'm not sure we're going to have every T crossed and every I dotted by March 20th to the satisfaction of this committee. The biggest expense that we have in the district is personnel. There is no impact on personnel cost, and so it's really all on the expense side. And so our exposure on this is fairly limited. At this point, the exposure is in the area of busing and perhaps the wraparound care and athletics. It is not budget neutral. In fact, there's been additional funds built into the athletic budget for rental of lights for 12 weeks in the fall and some weeks in the spring. And we have reserved some funding in the transportation budget should we need to add an additional morning or afternoon bus to have some flexibility. And so I think that I'd be happy to come forward with an implementation plan, but I think that implementation plan is going to focus more on here are the surveys we're putting out, here's the information we're getting back, here are the trends that we're seeing in terms of usage, intention for usage. But until we actually implement this, we will not fully have identified the impact on transportation or athletics or wraparound. And so it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. I would love to have a more leisurely window to provide a more detailed plan, but many of the details will change if we push this off a year. And so I think that plan would necessarily change again. And it does not align with our budget season, unfortunately. People don't buy their bus passes until the summer. And so it is a bit of a leap of faith. And as Chris said, sometimes we do the right thing for students, and you rely on your experienced administrative team to figure out some of the details and make them work. And so I respect that we don't want to make a decision that's going to have a negative impact on any other part of the budget. But the School Start Time Study Committee and the administrative team has spent hours and hours, hundreds of hours, trying to look at what the impact might be. And I think we've identified most of the areas that are potentially additional cost increases. And I feel confident that we can resolve those within whatever is approved in the FY19 budget. And so what I would say is I will not know any more until we implement this for some of those. I don't know how much more clearly I can state that. I think that's an important and critical part of your decision making, is that you need to know that more time is not going to buy us more information. It's just going to buy us more uncertainty. And so I would urge you to hold me accountable as you have. If you support this for FY19 and we change the start times in the fall, know that I am committed to making this work and continuing to listen to everyone who has concerns. We've partnered closely with the Teachers Association on this, and we'll continue to do that.
And the parents associations.
And the parents associations. And so there are continued conversations about how to make this work well. And we do have many, many months. And so I think I'm confident that we can do it. I understand the concern. It's a timing issue in terms of getting more information to be confident that we've budgeted appropriately. So that's my recommendation would be hold me accountable to all the things that Chris said. Not sure the March 20th timeline is enough time, and I don't think it's enough time for families and employees to make decisions for next year. So that's my recommendation.
So I'll make a motion that we vote to approve the school start time recommendation for changes in the district start and end time for 2018-2019, with the request that the superintendent report back to us on March 20th if between now and then she finds any additional budgetary pressures that are going to come as you know what I'm saying.
Right, as we survey.
You can end
for
it with
usage.
that we will ask the superintendent to come back March 20th with any additional budget implications and to continue to update this committee on this
On a regular
risk.
basis.
On a regular basis, sure.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion?
Is it, I welcome that, I support that. I just wonder, given all we talked about tonight, we'd like to know what those cost impacts are.
Yep.
My proposed motion spoke to, working with the finance committee to supplement the budget. That's certainly what we'd like to see happen.
Yep.
I don't know if that needs to be actually incorporated in the motion, because at the end of the day, one committee can't tell another what to do, which is why I was actually leery about putting it in there to begin with. Sort of a way to maybe set expectations. But that would certainly be my expectation. So, Judy, I want to be sure I understood what you were saying earlier. If we vote this tonight, then you would be very quickly going at, there are more surveys you wish to make towards parents, right? So I said this to someone recently, we're doing schematic design for a $10 million addition to McCall Middle School in 13 weeks. We've got 5 or 6 weeks until March 20th. So I realize it's not a lot of time, but it's a fair amount of time to get some more information. If you've got that and it impacts the budget, we should know about it and then make every effort to work hard and collaboratively with FinCom to support all the investments we just made last week, plus any of these supplemental costs.
That's fair, yes. Any other further discussion? All,
I'd just say that, I think you hear our concerns about this being done well, but I think you also hear a motion that says that we support this for what it will bring to the district.
Thank you.
so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks to all the parents for coming out,
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
too, multiple times.
It was riveting. So I was going to move up the list, and maybe we would have Dennis come up and we could look at the proposed program of studies for the high school.
Not leaving, Dennis. We're here for you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for your patience.
Nice to see everybody again.
Should I set this up?
Yes, please.
So Dennis and George came, seems like an eternity ago, with some proposals for changes to the high school program of studies, and we'd like to get your final approval on those proposed changes. He actually sent the draft, and he got some feedback and made a few minor tweaks, I think you called them.
Fixes,
Fixes,
adjustments.
To make it as close to the final version as possible, because we want to have students register for classes that they would like to take next year, and we want to be sure that we have sufficient staff to make that happen. So the major changes, just to review, major changes to 9th grade mathematics, moving towards an integrated math model that will essentially have students share similar learning outcomes, but at different levels of depth and pace. And that's a major change from our sort of traditional geometry, algebra, statistics, all as separate courses. We think this will set students up for success, but we want to remind you that this is connected to a similar change at the middle school at some point in the near future to better align with what we believe about mathematics education. There were a few other small changes. Anything you want to highlight?
In regards to the mathematics, we'll have just a paragraph stating why we're making this change, just to make it clear for whoever is reading this. And we'll also have the 8th grade parent night with the McCall parents. We'll go over that in depth as well. And then we'll offer a Q&A time probably a few days later for any parents that have further questions for why we're making this math move. But we will be adding a few descriptive paragraphs into the program of studies by tomorrow, I think.
Okay, good.
So that was the major shift.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The 1.0 that we allocated hopefully we'll be allocating in our budget last week to support the proposal from the wellness folks. Will that be reflected in, does that impact any changes to the language in the program of studies?
Is that a 1.0 or 1.4?
1.0.
1.0.
That would impact the phys ed offerings in program of studies quite a bit.
Okay.
We would have to address that. Once that's approved, we would have to change just about everything we write in the phys ed offerings in the program of studies, because it's not fully in there. It's just a timeline.
Okay.
Okay.
'Cause
We have information ready to go,
Yeah.
though. We can come up with that pretty quickly.
And if the budget allows for us to add those positions, I think there would have to be some discussions first, obviously, with FinCom to see whether that is something that's able to be maintained in the budget over time.
The beauty of the program of studies being online now and in a shared Google Doc is we can make changes fairly swiftly, and it's very fluid. So
Great.
yeah,
It was a great proposal. We were happy to support it.
great,
So-
thank you.
Sorry we couldn't do the full 1.5.
I
And
just
then-
had one comment, and maybe it's the
Okay.
edits you made, Dennis. So the pagination just looks off
Yeah.
for the table of contents. That's it.
So
So you get an A.
thank you very much. That's Marissa DeRoche does a lot of that for us. She's
it's her
she's
fault.
great.
She gets an F.
No, she gets the A. She does a great job for us, and one of the reasons why it doesn't print out really strongly is because it's meant to be read online now.
Online, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a question about the, some of the technology courses, the coding courses were listed as honors, and I thought, silly me, why are they honors? And wouldn't maybe more students take them if they were available at like CP, and if you did all the extra amount of work, it could be honors, give them some flexibility. But I think you said that people...
It predates me. It is an interesting situation with a number of our electives. We found that students didn't want to take them unless they had an honors notation next to it.
Yeah.
So most of our electives are honors in name, and I'm sure they are rigorous, but they are still electives, so they would be different than an honors biology or an honors English class.
Because, I mean, there's more and more in the program of studies for coding and programming, and there's now the AP elements of computer sciences is taught, and that's a little bit like easier leap for someone who isn't like a math genius.
It's certainly not like an AP statistics class
Right.
or the AP computer science class. It is a little bit different.
Right.
It's more accessible.
So I just want to applaud that and encourage more, opportunities for people to come at computer science from different backgrounds, because it's not all, you don't have to be, a mathmatician to learn how to code.
Our technology department is definitely inclusive. When you go into that classroom, you'll see students that have really had no interest in taking a computer science class or might have been motivated by their parents to
Yeah.
spread themselves out a little bit, try something new. And you see students that are fully invested, but we haven't really ever had anybody not enjoy the experience. And all the students learn something, because kids are coming at it with all different levels of coding and abilities, but computer science is different than messing around with a computer. They actually, for a lot of our technology classes, we use an MIT curriculum that's accessible to the high school student, the typical high school student.
Well, and for what it's worth, and this isn't really about the program of studies or courses, but I had 3 kids go through the high school, and I did hear on occasion driving somebody somewhere, or, students talking to one another about, well, I don't want to take that because it's CP and it would dilute my grade point average. So just kind of something to tuck away as we
It's interesting.
discuss further pressure and...
It's a concern for many,
climate.
but not all.
Oh, I know.
It's an interesting
Yeah.
WHS-centric issue. The electives fair that we want to run should help kids be exposed to all the different types of electives that we have out there. Because looking at the program of studies, it doesn't happen by, not everybody looks at the program of studies or reads it intently.
Yeah.
And some students just follow in their siblings' footprints. Some students follow what their friends are doing. But if we have this electives fair, we feel like it'll offer exposure to the students of everything that we have that is available at the high school. So they might forge their own path a little bit more.
That's a great idea. So I would.
We won't have a wind block tomorrow if it's a half day. And we definitely want to have
pressure.
a wind block tomorrow.
Love to have school tomorrow. So the sooner this meeting gets over, then I can go to all of my many
Weather.com.
other superintendent friends and find out what they're doing and go on weather.com. So I will spend the whole evening preparing for what we're doing tomorrow.
I have a question that's really to
Probably most of
Judy
the
and
night.
Dennis.
Okay.
So last year, you may remember, we talked a lot about prerequisites. And Judy, I think, kind of shared an interest in exploring, kind of revisiting whether we need to have the prerequisites at all or have them be what they are. And I think there was maybe an openness to that on your part, but that was a year ago and you were tackling a lot of stuff. So could either one of you maybe just talk about, is that thread of a conversation still going? Is that something to tackle this year?
It's a long conversation.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll tackle it this year. I think it's years in the making, like our homework discussion. It takes a long time to change the direction of a ship, if we choose to change the direction. So when we talk about homework, we might not make significant changes. It might depend on a number of factors, but we're having the discussion. When it comes to barriers of entry, Judy and I agree. I believe in no barriers to entry. I believe everybody trying to reach their own level and trying to push themselves at their own pace. But that comes at all sorts of different scheduling issues, and it also comes at social emotional expense if a student tries to push themselves into an AP class that they're not ready for, what that means. And it's a big conversation that takes a long time to have.
Do you see the conversation around prerequisites happening almost like departmentally? Is it can it and should it happen within departments? So maybe there's movement in one area, but in another makes sense to leave it the way it is?
I treat the department, I believe in the departments as their states, there's the federal and then there's the states. And I believe the state should have their say in the matter. We do have a department that has lower barriers to entry than others when it comes to AP classes, and they see success that way.
And that's math.
That is math.
So Jen might have some strong opinions on this as well. I think she and I
do
share a similar philosophy.
Something I haven't shared.
Right, we've spoken about this.
Loud and often with the group. I think there are legitimate concerns, and when they raise those concerns about the social emotional and not just letting kids totally overwhelm themselves so that they can have the good transcript. But I think that's also a little bit of a cop-out, because it's our job to educate and help and support them doing those other pieces and still allowing them, it's okay to take a class that's challenging to you and get a C because you want to be in that class. And I think our mindset becomes you can only get in if we know you're going to be super successful with a really good grade.
So, yeah, so one of the...
A lot to talk about.
There's a parent component as well, yes.
One way to get at it is to talk about grading practices. What's the purpose of grades? So if a lot of the prerequisites or the barriers to entry are grades, then what we need to ask ourselves is, what does an A mean? Does achievement of an A demonstrate readiness to do the work for the next class? And if not, then what could we use as an indicator? I believe in something called informed consent, which means sign up for whatever you think will fill your passion that you think you're ready for. But here's what the reality is. If you take too many APs, here's what your life's going to be like. This course requires this, which is why we've pushed to start the process early and have students sign up and know what their classes are before they leave. So that ideally, I would love to have an opportunity for students to meet with their teachers for the next year and say, here's really what this class is. Are you sure this is for you? Here's how I encourage students to be successful. And so I think coming at it not just from a program of studies sort of list of prerequisites, but really talking about changing culture around how do we know when students are ready and how can we give them informed consent is part of the process. That is another way to kind of tackle that.
Can I ask a question in regard to that then? Are we also then, wow, I feel loud again. Are we also then going to introduce that idea to 8th graders, because it seems like we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort into the course of studies at 9th grade, and there is some transition meetings that happen, but that seems like a lovely way to start framing the discussion with our 9th grader, or our
Incoming ninth graders,
9th graders before they get there, rather than saying, here's the course of studies, let's go through it. And
Right.
And just, you have to take a placement test, and here's the recommendation of your teacher.
So I think that
is a
the
little bit
teachers
higher
feel really
stakes.
pressured around the whole recommendation piece. And, and I've talked before about, for some students, the light bulb just doesn't go off until later. And so are we adequately assessing their capacity to do really rigorous work based on a grade rather than some other criteria? And is there opportunity for flexibility there? So I know that the directors go and talk to the 8th graders and talk about the courses and talk about the life at the high school. And we're fortunate in the directors work across both the middle level and the high school level. So they have conversations with the teachers, they have department meetings. And I know Jen has been working especially closely with the directors this year on a lot of issues. And so I hope that as a district, what we're trying to do is encourage individual pathways to success and not sort of one size fits all.
Yeah, and the pressure really starts, I hear from parents all the
Sixth
time.
grade.
6th grade, it's all about that 7th grade split into the different levels. That becomes, at 11 years old, where they feel like they're being predestined. So,
Okay.
Can I, all good stuff, but I guess we have a lot to do, so if somebody could get me a motion to,
Oh, sorry. I move that we vote to approve the Winchester High School Program of Studies for the 2018-19 school year as presented.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you for staying late, Dennis.
Before Dennis leaves, can I just say publicly that he has worked tirelessly and for the whole vacation to hand schedule kids to make this WIN block work. And I know that some other people came in to help you, including Anna.
We
Very
received
nice.
a lot of support from a lot of different
A
places.
lot of teachers
Cool.
and support staff members at the high school are making it work, and it was an incredible behind-the-scenes effort to pilot this, and I just want to commend you for that. And I think
Thank
the
you.
students are they're really gaining tremendously from it. So
We've only had one so far, so we would like it to gain some traction.
it started off well. So there you go.
And you're not only just a rock star, you're the Winchester.
Don't feed into it.
On that note,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. McCall?
So you have at your table a memo, an update from me based on some developments of the past 3 or 4 days on McCall. We've only made a couple of adjustments on the soft costs. So we have, at the recommendation of the board, allowed for a small 5-figure allowance for a traffic consultant on the project. We also got a hard quote on builder's risk insurance. To just explain briefly what that is, so if you have we have insurance on our occupied buildings, but if it's a construction project, our insurer will not cover the project, and so we ran into this issue on the high school. So we have to carry our own builder's risk insurance. That comes in at $92,000. So that's also an add on the soft cost side. So the bottom line is we're still looking at a construction cost of just over $7 million and a project cost that is just over $10 million. And as we've said before, that includes things like owner's contingency, construction contingency, FF&E. Judy talked about needing to upgrade the phones. There are a couple of elements, and we talked about that at a recent meeting, that sort of go beyond the narrow confines of what this addition is about. But they're really, it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have, as Judy would say, right? If we're going to do it, this is the time to do it, particularly around the phones and some of the building technology. So that's just kind of where we are on the cost side. I also had the pleasure of actually talking to our architect on the drive over here, and he shared with me that so yesterday, because Flansburgh was the architect of record on the E-wing back in 2008, there was a lot of excavation that was required for that, and there was concern at the time around contaminated soils. So they did discover some ash, but it was up at sort of the other end of the building, near the sort of up Main Street, near the stands, if you will, the bleachers is what I'm trying to say. Characterization of the soil sort of towards the library wing was very clean. And so that's good. They've actually been able to go back with their environmental consultant. They found all the original test records. And so just yesterday, they were kind of applying that to what our assumptions were on the soft cost side. They feel very good. I mean, we won't know till we dig, of course, but they feel actually pretty good about our allowances there. And I might just say, and I'll pivot to Susan to talk more about this, as well as maybe just tee up the language that's in our packet to vote. But on the subject of traffic, so the board certainly has expressed some concern and interest in trying to identify where we have an increase in vehicular and pedestrian traffic. What is that impact like? Can we understand it? What do we need to do to mitigate that? So certainly that's the value of having the traffic consultant to look at what that's going to look like. Although, to be clear, that traffic, the vehicular and foot traffic, is coming whether or not we do the addition, because this is really enrollment based, as opposed to saying we're going to put Judy and team in the carriage house. That's really kind of a new use. So I think it's probably money well spent to have the traffic consultant take a look at this. There's a separate issue, which is how might we actually implement recommendations that come from a traffic consultant. I think there's a real interest at Town Hall in doing that. It's a little difficult because we don't, first of all, know what those recommendations might be. Right. And as those of us who are town meeting members know, some of those recommendations can be very expensive. I think we're spending 6 figures on temporary lights at Johnson and Ridge. And remember the flashing beacons at our crosswalks? I think those go for $75,000 or more each. So, I have a little discomfiture about language that sort of commits us to spend money on something when we don't really know what that's going to be. But conversely, my understanding is that there's maybe interest over at Town Hall in supplementing the ask, so to actually sort of inject some more funding into the project to pay for, whatever's recommended. That certainly would be better than nothing, but again, the wild card is, how do you know what to bank for that when you don't know what the recommendations are? So we're going to need to talk about that a little bit more. Our architect said to me tonight that although they have many projects where they work with traffic consultants to come up with suggestions, in their experience, you always actually bid that work separately, because the signage and the signalization and all that kind of stuff is just so specialized that a general building contractor just isn't really going to be able to implement that. So they're going to bid it out to a transportation firm, and they're going to sub-bid the components, and we wind up paying a couple of middleman fees, if you will. So certainly very well intentioned, and I think it's something Susan is continuing to talk to some folks about at the board level, and we need to continue to talk about too, because it may impact the project cost moving forward.
I mean, just as I understand it, based on what the conversations I have had, the intention on the part of the board, or the hope, is not to take money away from the cost to actually build this addition that we've gotten designed, and we have a pretty good grasp of what the actual estimate is. I mean, we're very close to this being ready to go. But rather to add something on, this would be the basis for the override, but then they would add some amount on top of that to give them some resources to, take a look at the traffic and, address what the needs seem to be. And, it seems to me that, the safety around the school is a shared responsibility between the town and the schools, right. And we want our kids to be safe walking to school, and the traffic to be, controlled, and during the drop-off periods especially, and pickup periods. So, I think we're going to have to figure out the details and work together with the board, so that when we, the time is approaching that we really they have to vote, and in order to get this on the ballot for the March election. So. Yep. More details to follow, but very soon. So I think we were looking to approve the, I wish we had a slide again, but, approve the concept of this addition coming off of the E-wing rather than behind the library, and having the team rooms and the public toilets for the stadium on the ground floor, and then the cafeteria addition and classrooms on the floor above that, and then 2 more floors of classrooms, right? Is that four stories now?
Yeah, four stories with the lower level, that's right.
And also to approve the basic language for the special town meeting warrant article, a special town meeting motion, and the debt exclusion ballot question, which is what's in your packet, that are sort of roughly similar. They talk about the,
And I think
phase two.
we shared this in draft format at a previous meeting, right?
I think we did.
We don't need to go through and read it or
Yeah.
anything, so.
This is just like the second read.
I'm happy
Nothing
to
has
make a motion.
changed in this, correct?
Nope.
No.
Okay.
Happy to make, let me just, hold on.
Nothing
Minor
jumps out
change,
right now.
Michelle, based on the advice of
Oh, that's true.
council over at Town Hall, was to be clear about what's in the project, but maybe a little less specific about
Right.
elements, just given how things may evolve in design development.
Okay.
So, and we also added the note here, I won't read the whole thing, but the construction of Phase 2 of McCall, which includes the upgrading of building management and telephone systems. That was not in the previous version you saw. We
Okay.
thought that was important to add because it falls outside the
Right.
scope as maybe we've more publicly discussed it. So that is an addition. An addition to the language, renovation of existing spaces, expansion of the cafeteria, and the construction of a 4-story addition, which includes general education classrooms, specialist workspaces, public toilets, and other supplemental building program as outlined in the master plan. So,
Okay.
yeah, subtle
Tweak.
change, and we added a couple of things, so thank you for asking that.
Sure.
And you didn't feel you wanted to include the contingency as the,
So this is a kind of a back and forth with
okay. I trust you.
Town Hall.
It was-
And it's in there. It's,
Okay. It's in
yeah.
the backup.
Yeah, it's in there. Oh,
Okay.
yes. And that's not going to change, by the way. We've talked about that at the working group. We're going to stick with the 10% contingency and the owner's contingency as well. We'll hold that
Okay, thanks.
for sure. So I'm happy to make a motion to approve the recommended ballot question and warrant article language as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So where's my agenda?
Budget update and
Yep,
superintendent's
budget
bill.
update would be next.
So the next stage in the process for balancing our needs and wants with available resources is to meet with the Budget Advisory Committee. We're meeting Friday morning, 8 a.m., to talk about the town manager's projected available resources. And as you might expect, there's a very significant shortfall between what he believes the town can afford to fund and what our ask is. And so a major factor in that is a 13 or 14% projected increase in health costs. And our employees are the major driver of that, since we have most of the employees in town. I think the town management team has done an excellent job keeping the increases minimal for several years, and now this is our year where we have a very, very significant increase of, I think, over $1 million. And so there are some
Pardon me.
ways you can tackle bringing that down a bit, which will require some negotiation with the Insurance Advisory Committee and some steps that the town manager is looking to take. So it would be my expectation that, as with every year, the available resources are not sufficient to meet our needs. We'll have to talk in detail about that and perhaps make some reductions to our additional asks, would be my guess, and consider fees. And so, as Mr. Vanalia pointed out, I think at the last meeting, we've hit the wall in terms of our capacity to tax to meet the needs of our growing student population. We're as efficient and effective as we can be with the available resources. The town is generous in giving us a fair share of those resources. The plan that the town manager is putting forth will require a substantial use of free cash just to keep us afloat, which in my conservative budgeting, philosophy is always a difficult thing, because then that money's not available the following year. And so I remain concerned about being as transparent and as collaborative as possible so that we can advocate strongly for the available resources that we need, but also recognizing that it's going to require significant work going forward between now and town meeting to land on a budget that is at least a level service budget. So I wish I had better news on that front. I mean, the good news is the cost for full-day kindergarten came through in our Chapter 70 allocation proposed by the governor's budget, and with several $100,000 above that. But I think all of those costs are kind of eaten up in the health insurance piece. Ellen, anything about the budget that you wanted to share tonight?
At each of the members' chairs, there is a just updated budget sheets for your binders. It just reflects the budget that you had voted last week, as well as updates to sheets that have had any changes for the schools since the book was first published.
So we're trying to keep you with some updated sheets as we vote. But as with every year, you know, we kind of shift our priorities depending on the resources. And so I'd anticipate this will be the first of several discussions over the next couple of months.
I'm sorry, so we voted the 1.0, one for enrollment, one for the out-of-district coordinator, one for the high school, and then an additional one that would be split between the contractual elementary and middle school potentially for guidance, because the idea being that we would hit all three levels. It looks like the elementary contractual, if that's what it is 0.24.
So what I will do is it was listed as a 1.0 on here under contractual services for program improvement.
But that could be used at any level.
That's the 0.24.
The point.
That's the 13,000.
No, so the elementary contractual, that was the pre-K increases that were not covered by a tuition increase. If you look down at the very bottom of the sheet.
Oh, sorry.
Where it says non-personnel accounts.
Yeah.
SPED program improvement, contractual services. That is the one, right, 41,000.
That's the one FTE equivalent. One FTE.
That's one FTE equivalent.
But I'm sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. My understanding was that we were not going to use contractual services at the middle school. It was just going to be at the elementary school.
Oh, I don't think we made a firm decision because that wasn't one of our asks initially in this year's budget presentation. So I need to go back to the team and see where the need is.
For
and I
what
think
it's worth, I had the same impression.
We were well, and we may well need it at middle school, but I need to look at what the current counseling loads are and where we're having holes in our program. And I'll come back to you with a more. If I suspect this will fall by the wayside in terms of available resources to fund this, but if it is maintained in the budget, I'll come back to you with a plan. I just haven't had a chance to meet with the team and talk about the additional ads because they weren't part of the initial budget presentation.
Okay.
So I hear that you.
I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost as non-personnel. That it was intended to be personnel. It was meant to be people time, and so I just want to make sure that got included. And it was the budget that we felt strongly about voting for. So, thank you.
And I also have just one suggestion. The number is there, but if we look under personnel accounts, Ellen, we go down to where you have that add the additional +1 for enrollment.
Yes.
Under cost center, it says Morocco. Clearly, we have the hotspot there.
Right.
But we've also said that could change. We've got a pending hotspot at VO. I was wondering if we could just change that from Morocco to elementary, and then under proposal, where you already have a +1 for pre-K. So it says elementary enrollment pre-K. Could this just say elementary enrollment K-5? And then it's sort of it's fungible about where you put it.
Okay, so for the purposes of the budget, I do need it to be.
Has to land somewhere.
It has to
For
land
units,
somewhere.
it has to tie to something.
So what I can do is I can go back to where it says Morocco, and I can do a /TBD placeholder for enrollment.
Right.
Okay.
The preschool ad is just for a TA
That
too.
I got
Not
it.
a teacher.
So this is just a revised breakdown of what we voted.
Right, and I'm
how it
glad
looks
you're
in the
checking
budget,
it because I just want to make sure it reflects what you voted and not.
It looks different, but I think it makes sense.
The 13,000 projected shortfall in preschool has to be covered somewhere. If we don't increase the tuition, we have to increase it from some other budget line. That's
and it looks slightly different with the formatting. I actually put in the lines and
That's okay.
column, so it would be a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, to read all the way across.
I thought this. I actually want to commend Ellen for doing this because I don't think we've done this in the past. is kept such an updated, sort of as we've made votes, and so I think it's really helpful to keep us all honest
And this is.
We did vote to up the preschool tuition? No, I
Did
guess.
not. We
no,
did not. We didn't vote on any fees.
We didn't vote on any
Not
of the
yet.
fees. Why did
We
we
never
not vote on
voted.
any of the fees? Because
We sort of had the discussion, and then we never voted or not voted. We just kind of moved on from it.
so I think
it seems like that would be helpful to you.
Right.
It's also like a chicken and egg thing. So how do you know the fees until you know the budget? If you feel really strongly about fees, you can make that decision and then vote a budget. So we voted the budget first. And the expectation is we're coming back to
We're
fees.
gonna have to come
yes?
back.
But fees was
But
on the
I
vote
want to
last
make
week,
sure
yes.
that we don't lose something that we wanted to have in there because of fees, because I might
Right.
I might support an increase in the fees in order to support the program improvements.
right.
Right. Correct.
Okay, sorry.
So does that need to be back on our future agenda
Yeah,
items?
I think so, because then the preschool parents need to know and it's only a small increase. What is it, 200,
Right.
400? It's fair to get that out there so
Notice.
that they can plan.
Well, and athletics too.
Right.
Agreed.
Maybe when this comes into a little more focus with with the town manager's budget, because we voted a 5.52% increase, and we don't know that he's going to agree with that, right?
Right. So the tricky part about planning for this year's budget, it's a 5.52 year-over-year increase, but the cost for the full-day K is an additional ask from Chapter 70, but it wasn't in our base budget last year as an
Right.
allocation. It was only the appropriated budget that was the regular school department budget. So if you add it in, it looks like a much higher increase because of the cost of the full-day K. So we've got to provide for that, but it's easy to sort of slide that to the side.
We should.
Well, that's why you
It
have
should.
these meetings with.
Yeah.
So it's a non-increase in budget, but it's a decrease in revenue or funding to go towards this budget.
So it's something that we just have to make sure we provide for.
Yeah, I mean, we were very happy when we saw that Chapter 70 went up substantially.
1.2 million.
We had, we wanted it to cover all-day kindergarten, and that was, we estimated 571,000 increase, and it was much more than that. But celebration was short-lived because there's so many other needs.
Exactly.
So many other.
I would say, though, that to be fair to the rest of the state, it's a 14 or 15% increase in our Chapter 70, one of the highest in the state. I don't know that I found anyone who had a higher percentage increase, so
Well,
it really
because
paid off for us.
All the kindergarten students being full-time got counted in our enrollment, so.
And we weren't held harmless, so that's a huge benefit.
But we'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sure the very last thing you want to do is talk about my mid-year formative assessment.
Well,
As we look at the clock and it's 9:10. So I'll just very briefly review this and then you can ask questions. So the purpose of doing this is to keep me honest against the goals that I've set for the year and provide you with opportunity to give me feedback for improvement. We ask teachers to do this, we ask administrators to do this, and so it's important to me that you understand what we've been working on and provide more information about things that you would like to encourage greater effort in. So the first goal is about increasing collaboration both in and out of district. The things that I'd like to highlight that I think have been very good learning experiences and have great potential, the District Advisory Committee, which has fumbled a little bit to try to find issues that truly relate to K-12 challenges in individual schools, and some clarity on that and what belongs at the school level and what belongs at the district level. But it's a great group, and we're really redefining ourselves a little bit, and it's been successful, I think, as have the school advisory committees. Obviously, there was a lot of collaboration on the School Start Time Study Committee. Teachers played an active role in that, as did community members. I've got a great collaboration with the new president of WEA, Anna Paradise, and I continue to play a very active role in a number of outside boards, including MCIEA, our SEAM collaborative board, and the Middlesex Partners Just for Youth, where I serve on the executive board. So I think we've got a nice balance here of collaboration and increased collaboration. The one area I would say that I need to pay more attention to in the second half of the year is to get into schools more frequently to speak directly with teachers and staff. My visits are frequent to classrooms, but I'm really focused on the students, and I don't speak with the teachers much. So I've got to find some other informal ways to talk with individual teachers as the year continues. So that's goal 1. Goal 2 is a student learning goal around some innovative practices like flexible grouping, multi-age, multi-grade, co-teaching, and expansion of technology as a tool for teaching and learning. Like all superintendents, I heavily rely on members of the team to implement many of these things. I want to give a shout out to Jen Alanema. She's done an amazing job moving the grade 5 BYOD forward. She and Pam Gerard have been extraordinary in supporting co-teaching. The whole leadership team visited co-teaching classrooms at Morocco this week. Was it this week? Last week? Last week. And we were our jaws were on the floor. It was just such an inspiring experience to see multiple adults working with kids. They were all engaged. They were doing rigorous work. It was seamless. And I know the hard work and angst that has gone behind the scenes, the professional development, the support. And so I think that's going really well. Also, I think we've made good strides to the integrated math implementation. It's been a challenging effort, but the one piece we haven't talked about much, although it's here listed as a goal for 1920, is multi-age, multi-grade, looping classrooms. Those sorts of conversations need to happen. They won't happen necessarily for 18-19 at this point, but I'd like to make some of those happen for 19-20. Okay, on to the next page. This hurts my heart. World language program expansion doesn't look like it's happening for next year. I hope we can commit to making it part of FY20. Very proud of Dennis for his work at Winblock and also planning for the June Academy and school start time. So I think our efforts of moving the district forward and focusing on innovation and improvement have been somewhat painful sometimes, but I hope will bear great fruit. Next page, the next category, goal category, is supporting increased capacity to attract and retain diverse staff members. We're working closely with Lori Kirby on this, and I've listed some action steps there. Jen's done an outstanding job bringing teaching tolerance into the district, and it's been incredibly well received. The Wellness Action Plan is still in the working draft stage, but we continue to make progress on that. And we're trying to work with directors to draw from a wider variety of instructional materials, and it's always a bit of a challenge. We have a fairly conservative traditional curriculum in many aspects, and so still a journey, still pushing on that, and we will take a look at any proposed new texts that are moved forward as part of the budget and make sure that Jen and I both gently suggest some additional texts that might be more diverse. We certainly look at every book that's being proposed for a textbook implementation. So that's District Goal 2. District Goal 3 is working on the McCall expansion project. Chris Nixon's leadership on this has been extraordinary. We are so blessed to have an architect on our school committee. EFPBC has been very hardworking, continues to support this. We will resubmit the Lynch and Morocco SOIs. They're due by April. And we're a little bit stalled on moving forward on the accessibility plans for Parkhurst and the Carriage House. I'm very invested in, I talked with Meg White at the town hall about this today, trying to get this building an elevator so that we can have some flexibility.
Do you mean Parkhurst and Mystic, or do you mean the Carriage House? Because the elevator would be part of the schematic design for the Carriage House.
So Parkhurst, my first priority would be to have an elevator put in here so we could use this for swing space.
Right.
I have not had any conversations about the Carriage House recently, so we need to, that's on as
We'll
a
be talking
capital
about that
project.
soon for Springtown meeting. That will absolutely
That will have to
include an
happen.
elevator, yeah.
So overall, as I reflect on where we are in the district, I think it's, sometimes you have to take a step back and look at all we've accomplished. And I know that we'll be losing a couple of school committee members this year who've worked long and hard on certain initiatives. Certainly Cindy's work on the strategic visioning, I think will pay big dividends in terms of helping guide decision-making going forward. I'm really proud of the work that's been done by the school committee members to support and lead this district. And I know you know, if I get 500 emails on the school start time issue, you all receive several hundred emails as well. And I know you answer them all and you try to talk to people. And it's hard to believe you do it all for zero compensation, but satisfaction of knowing how great our district is and how great it continues to be and will be, I hope will carry those efforts forward. So that's where I stand. Is there any other feedback that I did not note here that you want any more information about that?
I have a process question.
Mhm.
So a year ago, you set up you gave us 9 subfolders for evidence.
I need to populate
you're gonna
those.
do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do it again. And if there are things that you'd like to see that you don't normally see, then I can certainly dump those in as well. I do have thousands of documents, so
Well, I
I
think
don't
what
want to
happened
overwhelm
last
you.
year is you put in what you thought was illustrative,
Yep.
and then gave us the opportunity to see if there were any areas where we were looking for some. I think you
Right.
sort of made the first move.
Right.
That was very helpful, for me anyway. And then you gave us some supplemental information where we were looking for it. So
Sure.
that would be great.
I'll do that.
Anybody have any questions, ideas?
Just a comment. I want to just highlight that on the continuing to form effective and trusting relationships, I just point out that I kind of put this all into the category of the leadership and communication. These are real opportunities that are upcoming in the next year and the rest of this year. So clearly, the implementation and communication about the start time, those are opportunities. The world language curriculum, I suspect that you're going to have a task ahead of you to sort of go back to a team that has been somewhat disappointed, but you're going to need to keep them sort of motivated because this is truly something that we want to do. The budget advocacy, I think that this year might be some of your best advocating necessary. And then recruiting and diverse staff members, I think, is also an opportunity because you can support, that effort by kind of bringing the case forward to both the leadership team, the buildings, as well as to the community about how important that is. I mean, there's many areas we can improve that. And then lastly, of course, the number of debt exclusion and capital projects. They're going to require some time to put in there. So, my sort of suggestion is more frequent and sort of practiced will get us the message out there. So these opportunities.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
So Susan, it might be helpful if you could follow up with us by email after the meeting, knowing we have 2 meetings left. Judy's going to build some evidence for us, sort of remind the committee, including our newest member, the timing and sort of expectations on our part before we reconvene as a new group after the election.
Okay. Yep. We'll do that, the eval process, yep.
I just have one comment. if that's okay. So I appreciate that you're discouraged by the foreign language, the world languages, but the work is still good work, and it's still very much viable. And, I think the enthusiasm you bring in terms of bringing a non-Western language to the district, I hope that even though it feels like an obstacle now, you'll see it as an opportunity to think about how we can do this the way you'd like to do it. Maybe it's not just 6th grade, maybe it's more integrated at the elementary grades. And so I caution, don't worry that just because the pace isn't what you hoped it would be, that it's not a good idea. It is a good idea. I think that we all struggle with sometimes not getting things to happen in the speed that we're ready for them to happen, but I think in that case that the patience of it will allow things to creative solutions to present themselves.
Well, I think, and that's a good point. We're hosting a visiting team in March, so they'll give us some ideas too, so that'll be great.
And I think the work they're doing around performance-based?
Performance-based assessment, yeah.
Proficiency.
Proficiency, thank you.
Because with
I
also
think
because
is incredibly valuable part of that whole process that's rising to the top, and the messaging around that I think is key. It goes along with so much of what we're talking about. So
A lot of great things happening, and terrific leadership. Our leadership team is very strong.
we have a great leadership team.
Okay. Okay. So I don't have a report. Nor do I. You. So our next meeting dates are March 13th and the 20th. We have to remember to approve the strategic visioning beacons
nice.
and that beautiful document that I think will guide us, and we have to put that up multiple places instead of having it be something that just, you know, is in the back of a book somewhere. We should have more signage, you know.
I agree.
Yeah.
It should be a living
A
document.
living document.
Right.
We'll print it on all of our water pictures.
Very small
I was
print
gonna
on
say,
mugs.
maybe some coffee mugs.
Yeah, maybe
Remind
some
people
coffee
wherever we
mugs.
go.
We spare no expense, just don't squeeze it too hard.
So if anybody has any suggestions for things on the upcoming agendas, let me know. Probably
That's for the next two
tired.
meetings.
The next two meetings.
The
yes.
next two meetings. I have one request in the context of our school start time discussion tonight.
Yep.
So on K-12 music, and I gather you'd probably be talking about this anyway on the 20th, given our discussion, but you shared with us that McCall Elementary music instructional program may flip to after school.
Right.
So what
yes.
might that, yes, at the elementary, so what might that look like? You know, operational impacts, are we losing students because of busing and cost impacts and so forth? Whether that comes back under literally a report on music, or it just comes back onto the broader report on school start time. I don't want to miss that.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm anticipating an update on start time
Every
pretty
meeting.
much every
I
time.
just don't know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the report on music, I think, is something that the music directors were working on, and Jen, right? The
Right.
music report.
Music reports, yeah.
And we keep putting it off, and we will do it.
It's okay, they're okay with that.
Okay.
That says
It's a big
something.
report, so
Too
they're
many
okay.
extensions is not good.
And the visual aids, too.
The
Don't forget about
acapella
them.
thing was so awesome on Friday. That was a report in itself.
The concert,
The
The
concert.
concert,
was amazing.
the acapella, it was just phenomenal.
Absolutely amazing.
My daughter did that, yes. when she was here. Yeah, it's great.
And I like that our art has returned, too.
Yes.
Yes.
We have great art. There's art, if you're around the high school, there's some sort of pop-up art around on similar boards. Check it out. And unexpected places. And Night of the Arts is fabulous.
That's a Friday, right? Night of the Arts.
It's, is it a
I think it is.
Thursday?
Third.
It's usually a weekday.
It's usually a Thursday,
Oh, okay. Oh, it's coming up.
March. No, it's great. And, you're all welcome to participate if you'd like to display or sing
Nothing to sign.
or recite.
Motion to adjourn?
I leave that to my daughter.
Did you make one? I seconded it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.